So recently I had the opportunity to participate in a mini-set tournament hosted by the one and only Ignideus, and it was a really awesome tournament. It was a great experience. I got to meet a lot of cool people and I overall just had a fun time with it. If you haven't watched it yet, you should definitely go and watch it. I will link the VOD in the description. I do not think anyone could have predicted who the winner would have been for that tournament. It was really cool. But so back on the topic here, it was meant to be like a casual tournament, and that's great and all, but my dumb overactive brain decided to get high off a combination of my nervousness and excitement for participating in this kind of thing for the first time, and decided, hey, what if instead of sleeping at night like a normal person, I would just stare at the ceiling and lose hours of sleep just thinking way too hard about the tournament. And so in order to feel like I haven't gone completely insane, I will now proceed to compile all those thoughts and lump it into this video. So without further ado, I present to you my experience with Mini-Set Mayhem, the tournament hosted by Ignideus. So when confronted with the opportunity to participate in a mini-set tournament where you are presumably meant to show off the new cards released in the mini, I think the most reasonable reaction for people, the one that most people will have, is okay, that's cool, let's wait for them to finish releasing all the new mini cards. We'll look at them and then see what looks fun, and we'll try to build a deck around that, and then if that goes well, we can bring it to the tournament. That'll be a good time. And I think that's completely reasonable, which is why that's not exactly what I didn't do. What I did was immediately say, okay, I'm gonna bring Sword. And I will bring Sword unless the new cards end up being complete dog shit. So you can imagine my reaction when they gave us Durandal. I mean, if you're not too familiar, maybe you're not sure what's so bad about this card, so there is potential for this card to be actually good. Like, it has a very, in theory, strong effect, but it's just that in the current meta, this effect literally does nothing, so it's a pretty useless card, definitely a far cry from what old Durandal used to be. So the good thing was that Roland, the main body, is actually pretty good if you just ignore this part about Durandal. So there was still hope, and obviously Roland being part of the same sort of story, myth, legend, I don't really know the correct term for it, as Charlemagne, I'm guessing, was meant to be neutral sword support. So that's exactly what we did. So the first deck I played when the mini released, the first deck I tried was a neutral sword, and since Roland had a very defensive effect, I went with a more control build for my first day, and this was the first list that I ended up playing. And then after playing a ton of this list, it wasn't too bad. It wasn't very good either. I realized that I wanted a way to end the game properly, so I moved on to trying other archetypes. So I tried out this more damage focused one. We cut out all the control cards for a bunch of damage cards like Alice, Grimnir. And this one's not too bad either. The problem I had with it is that sometimes you just don't have enough damage, and it feels really bad to be like, it's like trying to roll that boulder up the hill, right? Like, you just like keep pushing with the damage, but it just doesn't like get enough, and it feels really bad to play it. So I was a bit lost about the deck that I would play, but then if some of you maybe don't know this, but I am a pretty big fan of this Japanese Shadowverse player, streamer. His name is Maito. He's a Swordcraft player, and he's actually the player I learned my first deck from. And I was watching him play because he was also playing some neutral sword, and then he was playing an interesting list that had a hybrid of both the control and the damage tools, and I thought that looked cool. So I did my own testing, built my own iteration, and ended up with this, which is the deck list that I actually brought to the tournament. I will make a separate video for the deck, so you can check it out there. I will link it in the description once it is done, but this was the list that I ended up bringing to the tournament after doing my own testing. I'll admit that it wasn't like, it's not obviously not perfect or anything. After like maybe I think 5 hours total of testing, I was like, it's good enough, so I just stopped and submitted it and said, alright, good game, this is my deck. So it was decided that I will be bringing neutral sword, and then the next thing to look at, of course, is what the other players will be bringing to the tournament. So this is the section where we will go through the other players' decks. I'm not going to be the one explaining their deck and what it does and why it's built that way, because obviously I wouldn't know that, I'm not the one who built them. My point of this section is to just give my impression of each deck as I was going to the tournament and looking through the list that other people will be bringing. And also I will go ahead and link where you can find all of the other players in the tournament in the description as well. So make sure you check them out. So let's go through. I will be going through the decks in the order that they were listed in the tournament bracket. So we start with a Night Stars deck, which was a control portal. So I think a lot of you are probably familiar with playing against this deck if you haven't played it yourself. It is a control deck that uses portals, very annoying tools like Rift Dweller and Satellite Interstellar Battle Cruiser to discard cards in your hand, as well as Chronos to time lock you. And it also runs Zenithia, which is able to duplicate Chronos, so if you're not careful, you can just be stuck at 4 PP for the whole game. So, and then yeah, I think that's the idea of the list. There's also a bunch of other generally useful control cards, Twofold Grace, Goddess of Compassion, a lot of effect removal with Fiery Barrage and Case Cracked as well. And I'm guessing Chaos Congregate here was used as a sort of like late game, not really late game, but sort of like a alternative win condition maybe. And then also Synthetic Eden, just a generally powerful card. So this was the list that they were playing, and my first thought when I see this list is this is probably quite a bad matchup for a lot of people. But ironically, as neutral sort, we are running Wise, so this is actually a very easy matchup for us. Well, not very easy, but it's probably better than some of the other matchups, which we'll look at later on. But anyway, when I was looking at this deck, I wasn't too worried about playing against it. I think I had a decent chance of playing against this deck. So let's move on to the next deck. So next up was Fading Hope's Last Word Shadow. Now this was the first deck that I saw and I was like, ooh, I might be in trouble, because if you've tried playing Neutral Sword, you have an extremely bad matchup with the Last Word Shadow. This is probably the scariest deck in the whole tournament for me, I think. It's a very solid list. It's actually very similar to a list that I would play myself, so I think it's a very good list here. And yeah, it's a very scary deck. We have very little way to play against it. You sort of just have to sit there and keep taking Dark Alice damage, and hopefully you try to finish the game. So this was the #1 deck that I was hoping to never have to play against, because I was extremely scared of it. So yeah, that's the Last Word Shadows list. It has a lot of very standard cards. It has Zabet as the new card. Very strong like general tool. It just does a lot. It has a lot of card power for like as a card, like it's just generally good, right? So yeah, I was very scared to play against this list, so let's look at another list. So next up was Dread Joker's list, and it was playing a aggro shadow. I think the deck is considered classified as. His list ran a few cards that you don't like always see, or rather you rarely see in like the archetype. You ran stuff like Odin, Chronos, Goddess of Compassion, Asuka, and Shuri. These aren't really cards I expected to see in this archetype, so it's a pretty interesting list that he was running. You have to forgive me for this awful presentation, because unfortunately I just happened to hold like one animated copy of these cards, so it just split them up like this, which is very, very sad. But anyway, for my matchup against this list, I think based on my experience playing on the ladder, I had a decent matchup into the aggro shadow list. So again, this wasn't a list I was particularly worried about. I thought I would have a decent chance against this one as well, so I wasn't too worried. Let's look at another list. So the next list we look at is Zuru's list, which looks to be some kind of evil Haven deck. Honestly, I have zero experience playing against this deck, so when I saw this I was a bit worried going in, because I don't know what this deck does, so you always have to be cautious when playing against a deck that you've never played against and you don't understand. So I was a bit cautious going into this, but there's a lot of fanfare effects here, I think, so I wasn't too worried about my ability to play against this deck. I have some confidence in my ability to play Neutral Sword in general, so I felt that I would probably be able to handle myself. So not too scary of a list, but just a bit of caution required, because I don't know what this list is capable of. So let's look at the next list. So the next list that we have to look at is Vice and his aggro Haven list. So unlike the other players in this tournament, I had some idea about the kind of player Vice is going into the tournament, so I had some inkling that he would probably be bringing some kind of non-standard list, and it looks like my suspicions were confirmed. A while ago, actually, while I was streaming, he actually popped in to a stream for a bit. Very thankful for that. Thank you for coming, Vice. Anyway, so we talked a bit about the tournament at the time, and he mentioned that he would be bringing a very strange Haven list, and bring it he did. So this was the list he brought. I will not go into too much detail on the list. He has made a video on the list, so you could definitely check his video out, which I will link in the description. And the night before the tournament, actually, I watched this video that he uploaded, and I've gotta say I was actually scared of this. This is another one of the lists that I was actually scared of going into the tournament, because Neutral Sword has a pretty bad matchup into decks that are aggressive, and this is definitely a very aggressive deck in the mid game. We have a slow early game, so we can't even punish them for their slow early game, so I was very worried about my ability to win against this deck if I had to play against it. So yeah, this is another deck that I was hoping I wouldn't have to play against. Let's look on to another list. So the next list we have is Such Patanko and his Sephi rune list. Again, Tanko is one of the players that I have some idea of what kind of decks he plays. My understanding is that he plays a lot of Portal and that he does like Artifact, so I was actually very scared going in, because Artifact is another matchup that is just super bad for Neutral Sword. So I was a bit relieved when he decided to bring Sephi, but also once again, like Azuru's Evil Haven list, I wasn't sure what to expect fully, because I don't have that much experience playing against Sephi in this tournament, not in this tournament, in this expansion. I did play a ton of Sephi when she was first released in Asvault, so I have some idea of how the deck works, so I was a little less worried on that front, but definitely still a bit worried because I don't know what Sephi in the current expansion is capable of, so I was a bit cautious of this one, but then also not super worried because I think this deck should be like not too bad. I think I should be able to play against this deck decently. So yeah, and that was my thought process when I saw this deck. And finally, we have the list brought by Bass here. He brought a very scary aggro blood list with Asthema included in it to make use of the Wrath, and it draws you cards, helps you clear board as well. This is another list, the third list I think. There were 3 lists in this deck, in this tournament that I was super scared of, and this was the third one. Because I have a long history of getting bodied by aggro blood. It's like developed into a sort of like, not really trauma, but like I'm sort of conditioned to just be scared of aggro blood, because it feels to me like they just have infinite damage. Obviously that's not true, I know that it's not true that they have infinite damage, but it sort of feels that way, so I'm always very scared. And like I said earlier, Neutral Sword has a weak early game, so this deck is definitely a deck that can punish me for that. So this was another list that I was extremely worried about. So yeah, with that we have looked at the lists for all the participants that aren't me. So next thing that I looked at after that was the tournament bracket, so let's look at that. So this was the very beautiful bracket put together by the host Ignideus himself, and as you can see, there's I guess I kind of spoiled what the bracket would look like earlier when I went through the deck list, right? So anyway, let's talk about what I thought about when I first saw the deck, the bracket. The first thing I noticed was who I would be matched against, and my first round would be against Baz, who was playing aggro blood, which, as I mentioned earlier, was a deck that I'm pretty scared about playing against, so not a great start for me. And then so I was immediately worried about how my first match would go. Then I went to look at the other matchups. So the other matchup that I think really stood out to me was the matchup of Nightstar against Fading Hopes. Reason being that Nightstar's deck has a lot of effect removal with like Case Cracked and Fiery Barrage, which is probably, in my opinion, the worst possible matchup for Fading Hopes and her last words, Shadow. So I was... Alright, just keep this a secret here, but I was kind of hoping that he would win, so that even if I managed to make it far, I wouldn't have to play against Last Word, because I'm pretty sure that if I had to play against Last Word, I would just get hard stomped. So I was kind of hoping that he would just win that matchup for me, so I wouldn't have to deal with it. Obviously nothing against the player themselves, it's just in terms of matchup, I just don't want to play against Last Words if I can help it. But the other two matchups, Dread Joker versus Azuru, I wasn't sure how that leaned just because I wasn't super familiar with what Azuru's deck could do. And for Vice against Protanko, again, it's another pair of decks that I don't have a lot of experience with in this expansion, so I wasn't sure how that would go. But what I did realize that if magically I manage to win all the way to the end, right, there is an entirely possible outcome where I have to play against Bass and his aggro Blood, Vice and his aggro Haven, and Last Words Shadow brought by Fading Hopes, which is probably like very unfortunate that it's lined up perfectly for me to have the potential to play against all three of the worst possible matchups in this tournament. So I wasn't super hopeful about my chances going in, but it's like a casual tournament where I'll just try to have fun, just try to play my best, and hopefully I can get a neutral sword to perform. So that was my mindset going into the tournament, and now it's finally time to look at replays. So let's look at how my game went. The first match for me was of course up against Bass and his aggro Blood, and I was going first. So now you can watch how the matches went in the official, not official, but in the actual VOD, of course, and you could watch that. But in this case, I can give my thought process in my game as well. So just including this part in as well. If you want to know how the rest of the matches went, you can go ahead and watch that. Now for the Mulligan, it's pretty straightforward. Wise and Alice not super useful in that point in time, so we just keep Troya for the early game, and then that's it. So we toss them both, and it's very unfortunate for me here. I pick up both Agile and Rosalie. Now these are both run as one-offs in my deck, particularly because I don't want to draw them too early because they are kind of bricky in the early game, so I only run with one copy of each, but I managed to pick up both here. But it's part of it is that I just didn't tune my deck enough, I think, so can't really just blame it on luck, right? So they go ahead and play Fierce Disciple there, which is pretty standard play for aggro Blood turn 1. And I play the Dashing Duelist here, one for draw because my hand's not looking too amazing, and also because this has Ward, which will help me protect my face from their aggro a bit. So they go ahead and pop down the Demon of the Keys, and they go ahead and trade the Fierce Disciple in. I guess it's just to put some damage on here. Maybe they plan to get rid of it next turn somehow, either by trading or by playing some other follower. And you see here, very unfortunately, I only have one neutral card in my hand. My deck has a relatively balanced, it's slightly sword leaning in terms of ratio, but it's relatively balanced between the number of sword and neutral cards, so this is a little bit unfortunate, but that doesn't mean I have to not play Troya here, right? I still have to play it for the body, so I end up playing the Troya anyway. So then we just have to see what they do. So he go and play Howling Scream. Unfortunately, it hits the Duelist here, so I will fail to block a bit of damage here. So we go ahead and trade the bat, and they hit my face with the Demon of the Key. So my Troya's still alive, which is fine and all, but this turn I actually took a while thinking about this. So my options were Loyalty's Reward and Agile Twin Blader here, and Loyalty's Reward actually wouldn't guarantee my ability to clear Demon of the Keys, which is why I was very worried about playing it. And I also wanted to save it as a buff for Charlemagne in case I drew something that I could use next turn, like the Oceanus, for example. Then I could use it to use Loyalty's Reward to buff that with Charlemagne, and that will make for a better turn next turn. So I decided to just play the Angel Twin. The other consideration here is that against aggro Blood, either they are gonna deal a lot of damage to themselves, so I don't really have to worry about finding damage myself, which is why I go ahead and decide that I won't need the Agile Twin Blader for this matchup, so I just go ahead and use it to trade instead, hit him in the face, just to keep some follows on board. Unfortunately, they enter Wrath this turn, so he's gonna go ahead and play the Yor here, and then evolve the Yor, and I lose my board as well as take a ton of face damage. And then they pass, so it's my turn now. I pick up the Asuka and Shiori here, very not a great draw for me, unfortunately. So of course we're always gonna evolve Charlemagne. There's no real other option, I think. So now Charlemagne's effect is in place, so we have a few options here with Loyalty's Reward with Asuka and Shiori twins. So I could play Asuka and Shiori here and draw 2 cards, and that arguably might have been the correct play, but the way I thought about it is that I really needed to heal, so my plan was to hope that they would spend an evil point next turn so I could play Asuka and Shiori for the full effect since I had my full 2 evil points left and hopefully draw an out that way. In terms of Loyalty's Reward, I probably should have played it here in my opinion, but I ended up not playing it. I think trading it for a follower was probably more consistent here. But I didn't, so he plays the Fierce Disciple and then Galam puts a nice 6 damage dent on my face here, and he evolves the Galam, which is good for me because that means that I can play Asuka and Shiori for the full effect next turn, which I go ahead and immediately do at the start of the next turn, so hopefully draw something good here. Unfortunately we pick up the Alice Day here. Day is a good card, Alice is a good card, but just not what I need right now. I was really hoping for what's that card called? The one that summons the angel. You know what I'm talking about, the something of the night. That one costs a follower that turns an ally follower into an angel. So I played the Loyalty's Reward to try and last ditch effort to draw it, still no luck, so unfortunately no draw here. I'm pretty sure I'm just dead to Fenrir if they have it, so I just have to pray they don't, and there are some options here, but I just choose to use my cards to clear and hopefully survive till next turn. If you look at my evolves, I'm at 3, so next turn I can hopefully try to stabilize with Alice or Roland. Wise, not really Wise, but with hopefully Alice and Roland can help me stabilize. If I pick up the Grimnir here, maybe I can try and cheese a Grimnir Lethal next turn, very unlikely, but that's what I was going into it, and I just evolved the Evan there, but unfortunately he does have Fenrir, so I'm just gonna go down to aggro Blood's damage here on turn 6, very unfortunate for me, so yeah, that was the end of my run in the tournament. So yeah, that was the end of my tournament run. I went with a nice 0-1, lost immediately in the first round. I had no expectations about myself and I still came out disappointed, which is just par for the course, I guess. Despite the fact that obviously I didn't really perform well at all in the tournament, I still had a lot of fun with it, so I guess that was fine, right? Yeah, so even though I did have fun, didn't do super well, and so in order to redeem myself, I have a small announcement, I guess, to make, and that is that from now until the end of the expansion, I will be doing a new challenge for my streams whenever I stream Shadowverse, where I will attempt to get a rotating win streak playing every deck that was brought to the tournament. So yeah, that will be what I will be doing until the end of the expansion, and if I can do it by the end of the expansion, I will consider that as redeeming myself for my shameful play in the tournament. And redeeming myself is of course just like one thing, right? I mean, it's not like really serious. Obviously I'm not really that like hung up about it. I still had fun, right? But other than that, it also helps me keeps you a bit more motivated to play the game and stream more, so that's another reason why I want to do it. And of course I also want to I do want to try out like the other decks. I mean, most of the players brought some spice to the deck, some spice to the tournament, even though I brought a pretty boring neutral sword list, I guess. But so yeah, in order to get to see more of how the other decks will function, what they're capable of, I will be doing the rotating win streak challenge. So that's it for today's video, and that was my experience in the tournament. Overall, I had a lot of fun, even though I lost a lot of sleep over it, and also because didn't do very well in it at all. But yeah, hopefully if I get another chance to in the future, I hope I can do better, I guess. But anyway, that's it for today, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.